All right, welcome to the fifth video. We are going to hang with the basic design for males and females and just kind of review. All right, this next slide is kind of a long one. So kind of no big deal. Feel free to like screenshot this and like just kind of use it for referencing if you want. I have an exam by it, but it's not an exam. It's just kind of a list. Okay, these are like all the things we've done. So many. So kind of no big deal here. If you like checklists, go for it. They can be awesome. Okay, so we've got our parts list and our functions list. For the most part, parts, you can, sometimes there are parts in multiple generalized groupings. We've got the outer structure parts list, we've got the inner structure parts list. If you want to hang with the first and second presentations and going through the scaffold with them, it's totally all right. Some things to make mention of, the organs listed for group 4 and 5, those are all considered muscles as well. So they're also considered listed with the musculoskeleton, which is the part listed as a mechanism. Parts 1 and 2 for outer structure, those mostly are redundancies. They're kind of there. They fit with the organization as it regards capping off a unit. The non-reproductive orifices, they are there. One thing to note here, the female vagina is not in there. So that one shows up in the female reproductive design. That's where we first see it. It definitely could be considered part of the musculoskeleton as it regards packaging. So with this type of design style, and this may be too much, so disregard it if so, I really could add some other parts there, like colon and bladder. But for the purpose of keeping things simple, this is really the best way to showcase the parts. And I'll probably touch on that more so when we get into the reproductive design. Reproductive design, a lot of it is about making materials, holding materials, moving materials, and delivering materials. A reason why I don't show it now is because you really want those parts that cap off the outer structure to basically help move materials back to the core of the generic anatomical build, as opposed to holding blood there. All right, so the brain is not considered a muscle as it's kind of categorized or classified in this type of organization, mostly because it only modulates systematic processes. This is kind of awesome. If you are an athletic coach, this is wonderful to go through. It can really put simple words in an elegant sentence, form, whatever. These ones were there for the inner structure parts. And they're great. They really start showing the systematic, kind of, I don't know, like they're super flowy. And when you speak with a physiological dialect, even if you're trying to keep it really simple, it can get really flowy. And so you don't want to get lost in that. So I'm not sure if, I'm sure some athletes that are coaches will probably watch this, and sometimes it can seem like a little bit of a tongue twister. So feel free to go ahead and just kind of say those sentences. There was a third one to note for inner structure fittings and fixtures. The uniqueness with that is that the inner structure fittings really connect the overall inner structure to the overall outer structure, kind of pulling it through. And the inner structure fittings really cap off the inner structure with the outer structure. So it's connect and then cap off. And that's really what fittings are. They're connecting the fixtures in a better way. So I've done this stuff with just like simple bird design. And for example, outer structure parts, they have some fixtures for the outer structure that are just fixtures and they don't have fittings. So wings would be the example for that. All right, scaffold's awesome. It's nice. What this really allows for is kind of trimming out a generic build with just fittings and fixtures. It's got some simple rules to it. It allows for mitigation of getting lost in that template, as the template is not a square template. And those fittings and fixtures are basically fully composed solid units that are used to better cap off an overall unit. So I have it here for the inner structure as well. So sensory parts and orifices, pretty cool. They're not identical. Definitely what I recommend is if you're going through this and you're putting words to it, definitely use the word region alongside, and then use the word whole, and then use the word sensory part. Some of those sensory parts, inner structure fixtures, are not going to have orifices. Bird one is kind of cool. So like that one is all sorts of wacky. For a bird head, it's like it doesn't have teeth, it's got a beak, and it's like a fixture, but then you got to pull through the orifices for the nose and then the mouth, and then you've got a tongue still. So there's all sorts of wackiness. And they have different sensory parts too. Sensory parts list for people biomechanics. We've got them listed here. It's very organized. It's pretty cool. If you look up online, or if you've got like a physiology book you want to reference, these are not necessarily going to be how sensory parts are listed. This one's pretty cool. You can put down regions. It was from that worksheet. You can do generalized regions. Planes are awesome. Those are going to be your classic biomechanical planes. The frontal one also is commonly referred to as coronal plane. A uniqueness as regards how I organize it a little bit, or reference just a generic anatomical build, is it would be the thumbs are going to be in towards the center line of the body. And of course, the simple words I use for the movements allowable on those planes continually for given generalized anatomical regions are going to be in order from the ground up: fold and unfold, then twist, and then side bend. The athletic diagrams, this first time through, I introduced this with just static state analysis. So the consistent force is really going to be gravity. When we do this within the next 5 videos, it's pretty sweet. We'll definitely do one with the cyclist. And we'll show vectors going in different directions that are considered static forces, frictional forces. However, it will be applied to a dynamic unit. And so, for instance, if a tire is skidding, that would be a dynamic frictional force. So I simplify this. This is definitely not a packing list for your gear. This is just really simplifying it. You've got a person, then any gear. I like this rule. It's really any gear that would modify form or mobility. So if someone has hiking poles, definitely, because they're getting a different workout. If someone wears a heavy backpack, definitely. Surface is just kind of nice, a solid surface. Doing this with swimming is a little wacky because it gets into buoyancy and there's different equations for that, but just static state analysis of an athlete standing is pretty good. When we start doing this with the dynamic stuff, I'm going to use some simple words, and it's not to dumb it down, but we'll use things like constant velocity, and velocity generally for engineering is going to have a vector, and if that vector changes directions, just with engineering, is considered accelerating. So we're going to simplify it, and we're just going to hang with the pardon me, the actual amount of velocity, and not so much that it is a directional type of unit. So really just a scalar quantity. I think if you pick up a physics book, and you look up like acceleration and velocity and those types of things, it's introduced differently. Sometimes it's like constant velocity, sometimes it's constant acceleration, and then if you get into like angular acceleration and that kind of stuff, a lot of times that content's taught in different order. Sometimes it has to do with just like easy to understand conceptual order. Sometimes it has to do with which one was invented. Sometimes it has to do with, is this engineering biomechanics or is this kinesiology biomechanics? So we'll keep it really simple. And so when we go through and we use these tools, which we'll do in the 6th video, if you want to get the 6th, and I'm going to sell them in groups of 5. We'll go through the same thing. We do it in order. It's nice to keep it very orderly. And, you know, if you're like, oh, is this part a organ? Is it a fixture? Is it a fitting? Is it part of the musculoskeleton? Just consider it a part. Template, always functionality. And then the scaffold is really trimming out that generic unit with fittings and fixtures. When we get to the reproductive one, it's a little bit more important and is quite wonderful as kind of how I organize this stuff really congeals. You're going to have organs on the outer structure for gentlemen and females as well. And so it's pretty cool. Obviously, the first video for the basic design is like, okay, just kind of follow along as I walk through this this template, because it doesn't showcase a systematic design so much, but it really tries to help keep a systematic design described as a packaged full unit. When we go through and we do the template, these are really the only schools of thought that I add more understanding to. This first one through with the basic design, it touches on physiology for that third column, and that is for the systematic interface with that. It's only going to be used for those three groups, so groups 3, 4, and 5 for systematic functionality. But that will help with the mechanistic functionality that we'll touch on in the next 5 presentations. That really gets into proprioception as far as the sensory design, so that would be the 5th column. And that's going to be, let's see here. So the sensations are going to be sight, smelling, hearing, tasting, and then we've got flavor, and flavor is just a combination of smelling and tasting. And then next, group 6 is going to be proprioception, and that is going to be a combination of the other, 4 groupings, so 3 groupings, and that would be the 4th one. And that is going to take in those inputs, and it is the sensation of balance. So that's nice to add here because we're doing a static state kind of understanding. Obviously, it's going to take into account movement, but it's the sensation of balance. Last sensation, group 7, we'll touch on that more in the next one. It's a mechanistic one, and that is touch. So as we go through the next time through, it's going to be mechanistic stuff. As far as materials, and those really are biomaterials within that simplified template. And then it's going to be sensory design. And for the last 5 videos, we will touch more on the kind of capping off with those sensations, sight and smell within that simplified functionality. And that's really where you have fully branched the physiological interface for systematic, mechanistic, and capping off of an overall unit. Thank you so much.